Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that I don't normally sound like this, and I've got someone to help me if my voice goes. So please forgive me. I'd like to pay my respects to the Kalkadoon peoples and my respect to the elders past, present and emerging. And I actually rewrote my presentation last night because of my voice, so it's a little bit less academic and a little bit less about a paper that's currently going through publication, and a little bit more about why resilience actually matters and what it is. So I thought I'd actually start with my story. So I'm actually from the Yunangai country, and that's my land, that's where my heart is. That's the Longreach Central West region, if anyone recognises it. And I found it really interesting because the Yunangai language actually doesn't have a sound for I, and I think that represents the Aboriginal communities and peoples of our country and land, and the Torres Strait Islanders people is there is no I, there's we. And so when you're looking at resilience, which really influenced how I looked at the research, you're looking at it more from the perspective of not just how the individual can be resilient, but how are we resilient as a whole within our context that we live in, and that's really influenced the direction I've taken. When I was about 4, I moved to Kalkadoon country, and I'm forever grateful. I've formed lifelong friendships from this country, and I really believe that you are where you come from in a lot of ways, and it shapes who you are. And a lot of the resilience that I've been able to draw on in my life has come from my upbringing in Kalkadoon country. I think that we've had these conversations, how do we keep country people in the country? And I'd like to remind you that you don't need to. What you need to is make sure that the people that experience rural and remote take that with them wherever they go and influence everything they do from that point on. Whether or not we return to our home, whether or not we came from the city and this becomes our home, if we've experienced rural and remote, that influences every decision we make and every job we have. And we influence others and we get them to see rural and remote, not as a deficit thing, not as a why would you live there, there's nothing there, but as a strengths-based place. My research questions actually took me to the other side of the world. It took me to Canada originally because I was really interested in how the sociologists we're looking at resilience, so we're looking at it from a completely different perspective. Psychologists can be quite narrow sometimes in how we look at things, and I wanted to open it up and not come in with any assumed understanding of what resilience was. And eventually I went back and actually conducted part of my research in Seattle, in Washington State, and formed a lot of great relationships there. And met a lot of great people from very, very diverse cultural backgrounds, which was really important because my research in Brisbane lacked a lot of cultural diversity, and that was the nature of conducting it within sport. Is sometimes sport, unfortunately, is a very privileged place to be when you're looking at elite teams. Sometimes it's actually not about how well they can play or participate, but whose parents actually have the money to put them there and place them there and support them to get there. So Seattle, rowing in particular, had a program for the disadvantaged. So the kids from really poor neighbourhoods got to participate in rowing at an elite level, and rowing is a very rich sport. If anyone's ever participated, you'd know that. So it was really, really exciting to be there and to find out what resilience meant to them from their perspective. I'm not going to focus on that research today. I'm actually just going to focus on the model of resilience that I actually decided to base my research on, but all of these experiences actually influenced how I came to the model that I chose. And so this is just what we're going through, but I really just put that slide in because I liked the weed picture. I don't know if anyone's seen it before, but I think it's great. Be a weed. I'm not going to talk to this. I assume that you all understand adolescent development, but if my voice goes, I've got this great friend here who's going to jump in. But what I wanted to talk about is part of the area that I delved into was a relatively new area of neuroscience that's often overlooked. And I think neuroscience is important for every single thing we're doing because it's proving what we already know. It's showing how the brain's actually working. Now, we talk quite a lot about early development, but what people actually don't understand is that adolescence is our next chance to intervene at such a great level. The brain is reforming. It's going through progressive and regressive events that will shape the social brain for the future. We use it or lose it. It's in adolescence that our brain will get rid of any connections that we're not using. And so when you look at what Alice was talking about with disadvantaged youth and unemployment and loss of cognitive capacity, you can see that if the brain is going through its most exciting advancement since the early period, what's actually going on for these people when they leave 24 and 25 and their brain hasn't had the opportunities to develop in the way that it needs to. And that's why resilience matters. Resilience is not a buzzword of the individual should be more resilient. Resilience is all our responsibility as communities, as individuals within our families to support the brain to grow in a way that can take us into adulthood. I delved into the positive youth development framework a little bit because I thought it was important. What I noticed in the research is we're still so focused on deficits. We still want to talk about what's missing. And I really loved the community project, the film project, because particularly for our Aboriginal brothers and sisters, they get such a negative rhetoric of what their culture is and what the deficits are in their culture. But we actually grow and learn and become confident in a culture where we're facing strengths and talking about strengths and using strengths to overcome the things that are difficult for us or the disadvantages we might have. And the creative arts, as much as sport, are a platform to be able to do that in. And so the positive youth development literature actually looked at that. It said, you know, what are the things that we require if we're only looking at strengths? To develop capacity for young people to become very functional adults and not survive. I'd like to point out thrive. So it's this focus on, and ignore the word positive because it's actually not about being really positive and upbeat about your life. It's about drawing from the things that you have within you and your community has within you so that you can use it as a platform to go out there and do the things that matter. So it's very values based. But what I like about this model quite a lot is it's not just values based, it actually talks about what are you giving back to your community? What are you doing? So it's not enough that it's being done for you. It's certainly not being done to you. You need to give back because we know that giving back is actually linked with better mental health. And we know that giving back is actually a lot more important than what's given to you in how you grow and the richness that you grow within yourself and your community. And so then the question is if positive youth development's important, then how does resilience fit in? And the literature is quite divided in this. A lot of the literature talked about resilience as a follower. So if positive youth development doesn't exist, then there can be no resilience. But my issue with that was there were so many case studies that you could look at in the literature that actually showed and demonstrated that young people that we might not consider to be resilient actually were. So they had mental health illnesses, but they were still finishing school. And they had serious mental health issues, but they were finishing school. They come from impoverished environments, but they were still contributing to their community. And if we actually take our lens away where we judge behaviours based on social acceptedness, we can actually say that gang membership makes a young person more resilient when they're living in cartel country. You know, we can actually start to look at resilience as not a judgment, but this idea that if we can thrive in an environment, regardless of what it is, then something's going on within us that actually is a really positive aspect of our development. So I moved more towards resilience as a forerunner. So for positive youth development to occur, the building blocks for resilience need to be there. And resilience are a set of skills, and the literature confirms they are. And it's interesting with your PhD journey, because when you start, you usually start with a problem that no one else has answering. But when you finish all those years later, everyone's talking about it. And so when I started on this, and it took 8 years part-time, back in 2009, this was not a conversation that was on anyone's agenda. But now it is, and now everyone wants to talk about it. And don't worry, I'm going to skip through. I'm quite aware of the time. I won't go over. But the points I've been making to you, I think, are more important than what's on my slide. So my model of resilience that I've actually gone for is this. It's a transactional, and this is a mouthful, and I don't have much of a voice, transactional ecological model of resilience. And it's based on some research by Winder, who is from Scotland. And she actually did a great systematic review of all of the resilience literature and said, what are the common themes that we know for skills that are associated with someone being able to develop resilience? And one of the themes that came through is you could be resilient regardless of any diagnoses or any other issues in your life. They can coexist. So this is what the research says. It says there are intrinsic factors, and I put there that I think sense of agency is often overlooked, and that's what I love about film projects, and in our region there's a lot of art projects or the music makers, music projects, where young people actually feel that they have a voice and they have some control over what's going to happen next, even if they can't control their employment or their mental health concerns or where they live or what else is happening. There's something in their life they can control. And that is so important when you're looking at targeting resilience as a set of skills. And the other thing I think that's often overlooked is involvement in community, and not just, going along to the soup kitchen or going along and doing something because someone said, but what do you actually give back? And when we do a resilience program with young people, that's the question we ask them. What are you contributing to your sport, to your community, to your world? What do you do for somebody younger than you or less advantaged than you? How do you give back? And we explain why that's important, and overwhelmingly the feedback we get from them is that is the most important aspect of anything they learn. Okay. And the other thing that I'd like to say, and you can't see properly because the slide's not there, is culture isn't a circle. Culture overlays everything. Culture influences who we are and where we came from, and that's why I showed you those slides of me at the beginning. Culture influences every aspect of those three circles and should not be ignored. And if you're going to run any sort of resilience skills program, and I like to put the model up because anyone can write a resilience skills program that's appropriately, for their culture, for their land that they're on, for their people, for their community, if you're targeting these things. And young people need to be connected within their community, and I really feel that that is something that sport actually gives them. So we know that sport has a high value in our culture. We know that you don't learn these skills implicitly. They have to be explicitly taught. And we know that if you do explicitly teach these skills within a sport environment for young people who normally wouldn't want to be involved in airy-fairy stuff, we actually find that they learn skills that are highly valued and transferable to the workplace, that are transferable to other environments, that actually make a difference to their sense of agency and their sense of determination for where they're going to go next. They start to believe in themselves and they start to realise that they're actually in charge of their life. Other people aren't in charge of it for them. And just finishing up, because I'm sure I'm at time and probably a little bit over, is that I just wanted to bring that back to this theme that we've got of realising remote possibilities. And so, whether or not our young people leave the region or stay, they are just full of possibilities, and let's make the conversations about them positive and not negative. Let's see their potential and not talk about the youth of today in such negative frameworks, and let's invest in resilience as a set of skills and not a personality trait. Thank you. Thanks.